Just go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Ruiz, and I am the president of Pride Republic. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their schedule to participate in this evening's webinar. Before we begin our discussion, I want to recognize that any discussion of culture in Los Angeles must acknowledge that our home stadium and where many of us live are on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tongva people, as well as the neighboring communities of the Chumash, Kauai, and others. We acknowledge this and pay our respect to the ancestors, the elders, and our friends and relatives, past, present, and emerging. The impetus for tonight's session was a result of an incident that occurred during an official 3252 sanctioned Call of Duty tournament. During this event, one of the leaders of the 3252 was caught yelling at his opponent and telling him, "Fucking faggot, you're a bitch." As you can imagine, hearing this came as a great shock to many of us in Pride Republic. We've worked really hard to create an inclusive environment that was welcoming to LGBTQ plus fans of LAFC. Together with LAFC and the 3252, we've made great progress and could point to a lot of successful milestones. First and foremost, I think what stands out in everybody's mind is together, successfully, we eradicated the use of the Puto chant at Bank of California Stadium. We marched as one family in the LA Pride Parade last year. We had an amazing Pride Night, including having the Pride Night TIFO win TIFO of the Year by the ISC. We've hosted countless watch parties, pregame patio parties, tailgates, really working hard to be part of the 3252 family and actually be recognized as an official supporter group, because all of the members of Pride Republic love this club and love this city. It's why we adopted Mayor Garcetti's words on a speech that he did when the team was just getting started. And he said, "Everybody belongs in LA and everybody belongs at LAFC." So we believe that, we live that, and we know that it's something worth fighting for. So for us, to hear a leader from the 3252 spew such language was really hurtful. But we were really also encouraged by the outpouring of support that we received from many of the other supporter groups, including Black Army, Expo Originals, Empire Boys, LA Crew, the District 9 Ultras, Luckies, and Los Tigres. On the slide that you see here are screenshots of the incredible support we received via social media from these groups. But more importantly, we really wanted to turn this negative experience into something positive, something educational, and something restorative. Hence, this webinar. So I want to take a moment to publicly recognize Brian Davis. He's the Director of Admin for Pride Republic for all his work on today's program. This is his original idea that he brought forth, and he's spent tremendous time in coordinating and organizing the session and making sure that everything ran smoothly, which it is so far. So, all right. On with the program, we'd like to start with a personal testimony from one of our members, Luke Clipp. In his day job, Luke is a Metro Board deputy for Long Beach Mayor Robert Garcia. He has also volunteered with the housing advocacy organization Abundant Housing LA, a producer of a concert series and a new musical theater called A Little New Music. And he also serves on the advisory board of the street safety organization Los Angeles Walks. Luke and his husband have been LAFC members since 2015. So Luke, take it away.
Thanks so much, Paul. And thank you to you and Brian for all the work that you put into organizing this tonight. And thanks to all of you who are with us tonight. You could be watching a 0-0 match right now between Orlando and Minnesota, but you're here with us and really appreciate that. Paul asked me to share a little bit of my own personal story. You know, I don't find my story to be anything particularly remarkable. If anything, it's normalcy, maybe what for me is more remarkable than anything, in that, like many queer kids growing up, I figured out relatively early on that team sports were a little uncomfortable for me, at least. The various elements of team sports, I did not feel like I could fit or belong in the way people talked and the language they used, and the expectations we had of each other. It was tough. And I grew up in Catholic schools where it wasn't just that people were homophobic, it was that it was the religious thing to do too. So it was sort of a few things sort of compounded on each other, and sports just kind of became something that I didn't find a home and didn't feel welcome in. And naturally then gravitated toward musical theater, which I might have done anyway without sports. And, for many years after going through school, I like sports. I find them really fun to watch. But I've never necessarily felt like it was a home for me or a place where I was welcome. And that was true through college, going to the University of Michigan, to when I moved out to California, living in San Francisco. I went to a few 49ers games, a few Giants games, and even in liberal San Francisco as a gay man, I still felt that and saw, levels of homophobia that we just kind of expect in sports, and particularly in men's sports. So when there was the opportunity to join LAFC in 2015, I was curious about it because I've loved and followed soccer for many, many years. And I sent a message to my husband saying, hey, let's do this. Let's join. This will be fun. And he said, okay, let's do it. So we did. And it was always just ever about, let's just have fun. We went to some events and saw Will Ferrell, and, then they signed Bob Bradley as coach and Carlos Vela as the first team player. And I was just like, wow, this is fun. It's cool. It's exciting. And of course, in the 2017 season rolls around, 2018 season rolls around. What year is it? Sorry about that, y'all. And it was just so exciting to actually go to a match at the bank and get to experience professional soccer in this incredible stadium with all of these amazing fans. And then the chant happened. And it didn't just happen once. It happened every single time Stefan Fry kicked that ball for the Sounders, all the way from the first minute to the last minute of the match. And that was really hurtful. It really sucked. And it went from being something that I felt like, oh, this is fun, this is cool, let's just enjoy it and see what happens, to something where I thought, I never want to come back. This was a mistake. I never should have done this. And this is just like every other sport out there where the players can't be out because the fans are homophobic and the players are homophobic, and this isn't a place for me. And of course, for those who remember, the very next match, you had the president of LAFC, the president of 3252, you had Captain Laurent Simon, you had one of the co-founders of the Pride Republic out on the field, all reading statements saying that we're never having this chant here ever again. It's not welcome here. It's not part of who we are. And putting the pride flags out on the field at the start of the match, which subsequently LAFC did every single match after that. I remember when that first match happened with the flags, I thought, okay, this is cool. This is good. We'll see what happens. And they kept doing it and kept doing it. I thought, okay, the front office really wants to get this right. They really want to do right by us. But it was that match where I've got the tifo behind me of the Freddie Mercury tifo on Pride Night last year, which sent me a completely different message that really kind of transformed me and my relationship to LAFC and to the supporters of this incredible team, where this is something that the 3252 put together themselves. They wanted to make a statement about welcoming LGBT folks as part of the LAFC family. And that completely changed this for me, because it was no longer just that, you know, I could go to the games and thankfully the chant was no longer happening, and that's okay. It was also, we know that there are LGBT fans and we want you here too. We want you here not just to be here like anybody, but to be here as yourselves, to be here as your whole selves. And that for me was just something that I'll never forget. It made me realize that this wasn't just about enjoying a good game and having a good time, but this was about being a part of something, being a part of a community, where the game is the fun thing that we do when we get those opportunities, but then it's also about building community. It's about having those relationships with others. It's about just enjoying other people and enjoying them as who they are. And that for me is something that it's irreplaceable. So that's my quick story on this, and I'm really grateful to be able to be here and share that with y'all, and we'll be happy to take questions later.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke, for that inspirational story. Every time I hear that story, I kind of get a little bit teared up, because your experience is common with many of us in Pride Republic. So I'd like to now introduce our moderator for this evening, Mark Rostov. Mark is Assistant Dean of the Marshall School of Business at USC, and we're very fortunate to have him here this evening to moderate for us. So Mark, thank you very much, and we'll pass it on to you.
Pleasure to be here, and Luke, thank you for that inspirational shared story. I have to just be transparent that I'm a big hockey fan, so it's close to soccer, but I have watched the bank be built just a few blocks away from my office. Wish I would be back there. I want to apologize. I have 3 dogs, and every time that I moderate or online, one of the dogs will always bark in the background, so they get pretty excited. Just a little bit about me, and then we want to get right into the panel. I'm a 20-year veteran in the Navy, and the day after I served my 20 years, I came out. At that time, I was living in Bloomington, Indiana, working for the Kelley School of Business. About a month later, I started to realize that the LGBTQ students in a business school really did not know how to transition their lives from business school to the workplace. So for about a dozen years, I focused attention in career services on helping students and graduates transition into a workplace that had no anti-discrimination policies. It was pretty interesting at the start of a lot of time doing that. I remember making the presentation for the first time in a Southern university. And what was remarkable is students had to call a telephone number to find out where my presentation would be held, because they didn't want to make it public that they had a speaker, no less a gay speaker on their campus. Times have changed, but in higher education, we have some existing challenges that we still have to overcome. So I live here in San Pedro with my husband. We've been here for about 5 years. And migrated my way from New York City over the last 62 years across country. And I proudly call myself an Angelino, as I hear the mayor say almost every day at his COVID-19 press conferences. With us, we have 2 distinguished panelists, and I'm going to ask Eddie and Sid to introduce themselves. And then I'm going to break the sessions up into 3 main components. How did we get where we are today? What is happening in the game, and then what's the future look like? So, Eddie, would you please feel free to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Eddie Martinez. I'm the Executive Director of Latino Equality Alliance. We're located at the Centro LGBT Community Center in Boyle Heights, and I identify as he, him, his, and I'm also a council member for the City of Huntington Park. And thank you for allowing me to be in this space.
And Sid? You muted?
I know that mute button. I run outsports.com. We've been writing about LGBTQ issues in sports since 1999. So I bring a lot of context to this conversation. I've seen it all across soccer, across Los Angeles sports. And one of the things that Luke didn't mention is that several months before that playoff game for LAFC. At the opening of the stadium, the Puto chant, an anti-homophobic chant, echoed through the stadium just 6 months earlier. And I remember the team guaranteeing me that they were going to take this very seriously and make sure that didn't happen again. And of course, it happened again. So it's good to hear that it didn't happen last season. And I really hope that we never hear that again.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks, Eddie. So as I said, I want to kind of go through a little history here. And Sid, I'm going to ask you, and by the way, I do believe that Out for Sports was one of the references that I included in my transition packages back when I started my work in 2002. But how did we get here today? Sid, give us a little bit of a history lesson. What are some of the important milestones for the LGBTQ people in sports? How much progress are we truly making from a historical standpoint?
Well, let me stick to soccer and let me stick to Los Angeles sports because that's what we're talking about. So, 30 years ago, there was an out player in English soccer named Justin Fashanu, and he wasn't in the Premier League at the time. He was in one of the lower levels, but Justin came out and faced some homophobia, but he also faced some acceptance. He played several years while being totally out. And people forget that part of our history, that even 25 to 30 years ago, and by the way, in a culture, English soccer, that is far more homophobic than American soccer is today, that there was a gay man who was able to play and compete. And for many years after Justin left soccer, there was a void until a guy named Robbie Rogers came along and came out publicly. And I'm sure that you all don't want to hear this name, but I'm going to use it anyway. The LA Galaxy traded the league's top scorer at the time. This is 2014. They traded the guy who was leading the league in scoring for Robbie Rogers, who had just a couple months earlier retired because he assumed that gay men would never be accepted in professional soccer. And what's amazing is that 18 months later, Robbie, as an out gay man with his boyfriend in the stands, won the MLS Cup. So we can talk about a lot of homophobia that exists in sports, in particular European and English soccer, but it's been amazing to watch what MLS has done. MLS has had more out athletes play in games than any other professional league in North America. I should say men's league. And so there's a lot for MLS to hang its hat on. And it's really positive to see the steps that LAFC has taken to make sure that people, everybody, and I really feel like LAFC has done a great job with this in the last year, make sure that everybody feels welcome.
I appreciate that. Even though we are focused on soccer, I do think to put it in context, as you said, it seems like they have made more progress. But why do you think there were few professional LGBTQ athletes coming out? What do you think the game experience, the fans? You've been doing this for more than 2 decades. What are we missing with the progress of civil rights within our community? The progressions that we've made, but it seems like in professional sports we're still quite behind in a level of comfort for professional athletes. Could you just give us a quick insight collectively over the entire athletic area?
So let's be clear, women's sports in North America, professional sports, have many dozens of out athletes. Megan Rapinoe, who is publicly out, is the girlfriend of Sue Bird, who's a star in the WNBA, had pink hair during the World Cup last year, and won, I can't remember if it's called the Golden Boot or the equivalent of the Golden Boot. She was the best player in the Women's World Cup, and she was lauded as a hero. So by everyone outside of the White House. so and I don't mean to get political, but so women's sports are very different. Women's sports have many out athletes. I think you're talking about men's sports, and the biggest problem that men's sports face is that we continue to talk about the pre-coming out struggles and the hurdles and the homophobia in sports and the puto chants, instead of talking about how incredibly embraced LGBTQ fans are by other fans, how Robbie Rogers was welcomed with open arms onto the LA Galaxy team and 18 months later won the MLS Cup, and how athletes have changed. Athletes no longer, by and large, reject their gay and bisexual and queer teammates in men's sports. So I think the biggest hurdle that we have is the general tenor of the conversation that we're having. Instead of talking about the incredible inclusion that we see in men's sports, we're always talking about the hurdles and the barriers to coming out.
That's a good sequence. And Eddie, I'm going to ask you, I like the focus we're heading in terms of the driver of social change. Do you have an example of an event or a story from the world of sports that's been a driver of social change? Because it sounds like that's exactly what Sid is saying, where we seem to be lacking that same level of drive. Could you share with our group today a story and experience in terms of what's really driving?
Well, I could share my experience back in the 90s when I came out. I came out in like my last year in college, and you know it took a while for me to get to that place. And when I finally came out, I was embraced by all my friends, and I felt so good. Like, wow, you know, I finally got that burden off my back, and I have all this love around me. And I remember that fall, my friends took me to a Raiders game at the LA Coliseum. I'm a big Raider fan at the time. And as we were playing the San Diego Chargers, there was a fan right behind us that stood up, young Latin guy. He kept saying the F word at San Diego Charger fans. And he kept doing it throughout the game. And I just remember people around us just did not flinch. They didn't care. No one said anything. And my friend next to me felt bad. He goes, Eddie, you know what? Just don't pay attention. I realized then that in the sports world, there is homophobia. And now that I'm out, I'm going to have to face this in the stands. And so I always thought maybe things can't change. But some years later, I'm also a Dodger fan. We had a situation at Dodger Stadium where a San Francisco Giant fan, Brian Stowe, was beaten by Dodger fans. And at the time, we were having a lot of violence at Dodger Stadium. I always thought beforehand that we can't really stop these fights. They're going to continue going. But that one incident changed the dynamics at Dodger Stadium. Yeah, they beefed up with security, but it got people to be aware that violence in the stands is not okay. And since then, we have less violence at Dodger Stadium, less fighting in the stands. It was because of that one incident. So I truly believe that we can change as a society, as sports fans. We just got to be visible. We got to have those dialogues and be afraid to not be afraid to look in the mirror and see what we can do to improve our environment. So just wanted to share that story.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I was in a conversation earlier today, and the moderator said, oh, well, you live in Los Angeles where everything's fine and everyone's totally accepted. You never know where acceptance and you never know where rejection are going to come from. And to Eddie's point and to Luke's point, homophobia exists in Los Angeles, and the accepting panacea of California and Southern California, the acceptance and rejection, they exist across sports, across religions, across races, across genders, across areas of the country. And it's, you know, to Eddie's point, it's the responsibility of all of us to stand up to it when we see it, and to be ready to see it, because you are going to see both acceptance and rejection here in Southern California.
No, absolutely. I mean, moving across country, I don't think there's any community, large or small, whether it's New York, Los Angeles, Buffalo, wherever it may be. You're absolutely right. Not standing up to when you see it is as bad as being silent. So there is a segment of our community. I'd like Sid, to have you talk a little bit about trans communities' progress in contemporary sports, high school, transition to college. What could we do to assist the trans athlete? Because I think that, there's certainly a challenge, and how do we overcome that challenge?
So first of all, I would love if there was a trans athlete here who could speak to their experience, because I think their experiences are important to hear. And I hope that people will go to outsports.com and read the experiences of trans athletes. What I have found is this. We all know that sports bring us incredible happiness and joy, and bring us they bring us a place of belonging. And where I come from with trans athletes is trying to give them access to that, a place of belonging. And a trans girl or a trans woman, and that is a trans person who identifies as a girl or a woman, the importance of competing in women's or girls' sports that has in that athlete's life can be literally life-saving. So we talk a lot about advantages, and this one beats this one, and that one beats that one, and this one wins, and this one gets a medal. Gosh, the trans people that I know, when they talk to me about the suicidal thoughts that they have and the power that sports has to bridge those thoughts, I just feel like we should be trying to find a way to include them instead of trying to figure out what advantages or disadvantages they may have in trying to exclude them.
Eddie, same question to you.
Well, I mean, obviously a lot of my work is focusing on youth, LGBT youth and families. And obviously I can't really speak for the trans community, but I can tell you, working with trans youth, they live in fear. They live in fear of rejection at home and probably at work. They don't know if they could be themselves at work. And I think for them I think all of us, we got to provide a space for them to be visible, to be vocal, and to be who they were born to be, and to be in spaces where they are welcome, and whether it's at work or in school. And we need to advocate for policies that's going to support the trans community and create that pipeline to where we have these amazing trans athletes in our leagues and doing fabulous jobs and winning championships, for us all.
Well, I'll tell you, you would think we practice this because it's a perfect lead in, because, we talked a little bit about where we were inside the stadium, if you will. I think it's more important now that we look at the future. And Eddie, to you, because you brought that up, what can we do as LGBTQ citizens or allies to address bias speech and actions? What I mean, we talk a lot. We have these panels and we spend a great deal of talk, but what do we do? Let's break it down. What could we ask of our allies? What could we ask of ourselves in the gay community to make progress?
Definitely, thank you. So I have about 5 slides, maybe 6, and Paul told me to keep it short. But I think before we could talk about the future, we need to really take a look at today and take a look at the past as we just did, and be open to discussing certain issues or learning certain histories. So I'm going to share some information that might be not as offensive, well, might make some people uncomfortable. But first of all, when we get there, I just want to mention our mission is a Latino Equality Alliance, is to advocate for equity, safety, and wellness for the Latinas, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus community. Alex is one of our amazing youth that we mentor. He's in college now, and our goal is to always provide safe spaces for our youth and to engage their parents. We really focus on youth and parents. So if we go on to the next slide. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to be a little bit uncomfortable here, but we need to really face what happened here. Obviously, a certain word was used. I'm going to say it, faggot. And we kind of need to know the history of this. You know, it's a very disparaging and offensive word. You know, it's used to refer to gay person, especially a gay man. We got to know about the long history of using this word in popular culture, usually in reference to gay and bisexual men, as well as transgender people. This first word was recorded back in 1914, but it kind of shortened to use to the word fag shortly after in 1921. Sometimes people make a reference to a cigarette, but for this presentation, we won't be talking about tobacco. We're going to talk about homophobia. We don't know exactly when this word first began to use, but we know it was used in the late 16th century as an abusive term for women, particularly old women, and a reference to homosexuality may derive from this. And I do want to make a reference back in 2007. What's the name? So C.J. Pascoe wrote a book about, dude, you're a fag, masculinity and sexuality in high school. Well, it suggested that young boys at the time used this word to assert their own masculinity by claiming that another boy is less masculine. And then to your left, you see Reverend Phil, who uses, you know, he's the figure that he would go and protest at funerals of gay people, and he would bring a group of people with these signs. We see the signs every time we have Pride events. It's something that it really affects. I'm going to say that it's very visible in our community, but you know, we need to be strong to deal with these type of individuals. But it's real. So let's move on to the next slide. All right. So homophobia. So Paul asked me, you know, obviously, homophobia is in every community, but for the sake, because I work for Latino Equality Alliance, and there's a large percentage of LAFC fans are Latinx, so I wanted to kind of share some context to how homophobia is in the Latinx community. Now, our community has learned that throughout generations of life lessons that ridiculing others in the LGBT community is okay. Negative terms arise from cultural biases. Part of those biases stem from a huge influence of religion. Most anti-gay attitudes are learned through normal socialization in our society. Our society oftentimes celebrates all things masculine because masculinity means strength and or power. Sometimes masculine acting lesbians, queer women are more accepted in the Latinx community than, say, an effeminate gay man. Family gender roles in the Latinx community are sometimes considered to be defined by clear, bright lines. Oftentimes, fathers and husbands hold power over women in their lives. Same-sex relationship disrupts that traditional role. And the celebration of masculinity becomes a part of the Latinx community mindset, thus birthing homophobia and also internalized homophobia. So it's very important to know the history of that word, the F word, but also let's talk about homophobia in the Latinx community and what causes homophobia. So let's go on to the next page. Our next slide. All right. So these words do hurt. And I know some people might say, well, if I call somebody this word, or if I say this word, it's not hurting that person. But you don't realize that the person you're sharing that word with, or if you're sharing with that friend, that person might be prone to cause harm to another person. So you may not cause a harm, but you might be enabling that other person to do harm to someone else. You know, and these words could cause anxiety, depression, destructive behaviors, alcohol and drug abuse, and obviously violence and hate crimes. Now, these individuals here, that's Vicky Cateres. She was murdered. She's trans. She was murdered a couple years ago. And these young angels, Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos. One was murdered because he said was murdered by the mom and the husband and the boyfriend because he says he liked boys, and young Gabriel Fernandez because they assumed him to be gay, and they were murdered about 5 years ago, and they were in the news. So this is why we need to do this work to educate folks. It impacts young folks and families, and this is why it's important to have this conversation today. And if we go on to the next slide. All right, so we had a lot of negativity, but let's talk about positivity. Shoulder to shoulder. You, you got to live with love, and what love means is compassion. It means happiness. And so you got to ask yourself, if you want to move forward in life and have a society where we're all supporting each other, then you got to do everything you can to educate yourself. Don't believe in stereotypes. Be an ally. Use your platform for education, and always remember that you have a voice. And if you see somebody saying negative words, take upon yourself to maybe go talk to that person if you feel safe, and maybe not do it in the public, but bring a person to the side and say, hey, you know what, that word is not okay. And I do want to share an experience I had with a game about a year ago when Paul, with LAFC, we went with one of my board member, Daisy Chavez, on the bus to the LA Galaxy, and we had our pride colors. We were super excited. Everyone was all cheering in the bus, and somebody, I believe, yelled out the word puto or another derogatory word. Well, the whole bus went quiet, and I felt like everybody was looking at us and wanted to know how we feel, and that kind of like dampened things. But Daisy took upon herself to go talk to that person one-on-one and got that person to be enlightened that that word was not okay. And that's the things you can do, is to go have a conversation with folks, and maybe not put them out, maybe not call that person out in public, but obviously sometimes we do it in social media, but having a one-on-one conversation out of the game might change that person's mindset. And I want to end it with this slide. All right, I took this from one of your page. We support LAFC by standing shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in the 3252 around the stadium, around the world. We're setting an unprecedented standard for our rivals, becoming role models for each other's supporters, becoming role models. Role models. That means you have a social responsibility to other folks to show compassion and respect and dignity to other human beings. So moving forward in the future, this is follow this. Have this guide you, and I guarantee you will have more smiles in the stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Sid, I'm going to let you wrap it up. You gave 2 thumbs up when Eddie was talking about, and again, over the time with of sports, success stories are important to share. And that was the point that you had made. So I'm going to give you the last opportunity here as we wrap up this panel. Give us some of the inspirational stories that you've seen in progress, and specifically, what athletes do you think are helping everybody in terms of the same thing what Eddie said? We've got to stand up and talk about the positives.
Well, I think I've given some of them. Robbie Rogers and Megan Rapinoe. I mean, 2 people completely embraced by their teammates in this sport. One in Los Angeles. Both of them have reached the highest pinnacle of their sport. Both of them are Olympians. I mean, both incredible people. The story that I remind people of, or that I make people aware of, is a kid named Alan Gendro. He was and I know this isn't soccer and it's not Los Angeles, but he was on the Middle Tennessee State University Division I school football team. And he came out to his team over 5 years ago. And the guys on his team accepted him because they understood, even literally in the middle of Tennessee, that Alan was a good guy. He helped the team win. He's a teammate, and we're going to find ways to accept him. So we talk about, and Eddie did, and it's important to talk about issues we need to confront, but it's also important to remember that sports are beautiful. Sports are inclusive. The people in the stands at the stadium, they're all cheering for the same team. They may do it in different ways. And it's important to talk about how some of the ways are wrong. And I see this question from Daisy, which I think is so important. You know, as a woman of color, I don't necessarily feel safe confronting some drunk fan or a group of a dozen or 2 dozen crazy guys saying something. And I hope that Daisy and I hope all of you bring that to the team. If you think that there are moments when you don't feel comfortable confronting someone, whether they are being homophobic, or racist, or sexist, now is the time to bring that to the club. That is the club's responsibility to make you feel safe addressing these issues. They've said they're committed to it. It's their responsibility to make sure you feel safe and make sure there are mechanisms that you can address this in a safe way. So I hope Daisy and anyone else who thinks they may not feel safe addressing these issues during a match in the stadium, bring that to the club now. They have to have a system where you can address it in a safe way.
Thank you, Sid. I want to thank Sid and Eddie both. I think you shared some very meaningful points that I think everybody here can take away, some actionable items and things to think about as we continue to make progress. Again, I want to thank the panelists, and I'll now turn it back over to Paul, I believe.
That's me. Yeah, thank you very
And
much.
Sid and Mark and Eddie, we're going to turn off your video for now, but if you stay on, we'll turn you back on for questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of go over, that moment on the bus that Eddie and I had with Daisy. And, what I learned from that experience, what Daisy actually taught me is that, it's going to be, one by one, we will tackle this problem if we have to. And, it was definitely a learning moment for me as well. I want to take a moment to recognize Chiquilin. He's actually the person that was caught on video using the offensive language. Chiquilin and I have had some conversations and gotten to know each other a bit. And I think that one of the best ways you overcome bias is to get to know people, especially those that are unlike you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we really wanted to take this experience and try to turn it into something positive, something educational, something restorative. So, we wanted to take this opportunity to invite him to actually say a few words. So Chiquilin, if you don't mind, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I wanted to say thank you, Paul, and everybody else that made this happen, and for inviting me. I really appreciate it. So this has been a really difficult time for me, as I'm sure it's been for a lot of other people. When all of this happened, the biggest thing for me was I wanted to critically reflect kind of on myself and what makes me who I am, right? For those of you that don't know, I'm a PE teacher at a middle school. I am very involved in my community. I actually went to the middle school that I teach at. I was there. I was the second graduating class when they first opened up. And I never really left. I love the place. I love my community. I grew up in Pacoima, and I never left. So just a little bit about me. I used to be one of the leaders in Cuervos, the supporter group, and I used to be a director for the 3252. The other leadership in Cuervos decided it was best for me to be pulled from my position. So I am no longer a director for Cuervos. Actually, right now, currently at this time, I am not even a member of Cuervos. I have been taken out of the group, and it's been kind of put on pause until all of this gets sorted out. I've also stepped back from my director role as co-director of active support for the 3252. And that's just because right now I don't feel, and I feel like the 3252 doesn't feel that I represent what the 3252 should represent. And that's been a big thing for me. It's just kind of learning where this all comes from. And I never want to offend anybody or be offensive to people. So it was really like I needed to learn why it is that why I said this kind of stuff. So I have done a lot of community stuff. Like I said, I work at a school. Like it's countless the stuff that I do for my community here in Pacoima, but I don't think that's too important. But the craziest thing about this whole thing for me is how, like, since this incident, like, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, the amount of times that I hear that word thrown around in my daily life is crazy to me. And I feel like a lot of my friends, because I do still play Call of Duty, and it's wild to me that even with kind of what's happened, you know, there's people that I'll play with that know what happened, and I'll go in the room and they'll be like, "Hey, what's up, F-bomb?" And then it's kind of like, "Hey, whoa," like, you know, and then I gotta kind of I gotta explain what I've learned and why it's not okay. So, to me, it's been really kind of eye-opening. It's been really eye-opening. I know there's gonna be a lot of questions, but I want everybody here to know that it is an honest mistake, and I do wanna help change this. I see it every day in my community. We started school. It's our 3rd day of school, and the amount of emails that I've gotten, and I'm sorry if I get emotional, but I love my kids. The students that I share, you know, my class with, I love them to death. I've known them, again, from all the parks and all the community things I do. And I received the email from one of my students, and she was like, "Hey, Mr. E, why are these people saying these things about you?" Because, you know, they all know LAFC. They all know that I'm super involved in LAFC. So they said, like, "Hey, Miss, like, what? These people shouldn't say these things about you. That's not you. You're not this person," you know. And I said, "Hey, guys, but that's where you're wrong. I am, because I said it, and that's the problem that I want to fight. The people that don't know the issue." And I think that's what happened to me, and that's what happens a lot, is people don't know what they're saying and why what they're saying is hurtful. And I think that's very unfortunate. So it's been kind of my mission to really fight this. And, you know, unfortunately, my bosses were made aware of the situation. There was an email sent in, and I almost lost my job. And, you know, I told my boss, and I told the board of directors for our school, I was like, "Look, whatever you guys do, like, I understand, but I really want you guys to let me help the community understand this. Because even now in our school, in my school, you know, in my PE class, this type of language still happens every day." So I got my principal today, actually, he approved. So we're going to be doing a really good class, partnering up. So that's going to be, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but yeah. So what I was trying to say is the whole first month of my PE class, right now that we're going to be distance learning, it's going to be a whole piece on social emotional learning, and we're going to hold a couple of workshops for the students. And, you know, I am starting a club. I still don't know what the club is called, because, you know, it's middle school and it has to be very, you know, there's a lot of lines that the school has to follow. But it's going to be a club where people are going to come, the students are going to come, and we're just going to talk about this kind of stuff. I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, so I'll let you guys, Paul, if you want to touch in. I know there's going to be questions and stuff.
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, thanks for joining us. And, you know, like I said, it's one by one. That's how we change hearts and minds. So we do appreciate you, you know, having the courage and coming to talk to us and sharing your journey with us. We're gonna turn it over to Brian now, who's gonna lead the question and answer session. If you guys have questions for the panel, please put it in chat. And Brian, I know you have this on lock, so take it away.
Okay, so we have our panel here. We've collected a number of questions. Some questions came in beforehand as well, people that couldn't join us and wanted to participate. So And then keep the chat going as well, everyone. We will try to answer as most as we can. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. But if we have a bunch of questions that we don't get answered to, what I'll do is I'll email them to the panel and I'll ask them for their, if they want to answer them, and we'll share them with everyone as they register. So feel free to keep asking. And yeah, this, by the way, this is my new Los Tigres shirt. So I'm very excited about my deliveries last week. Our first question, one of our trans friends has just started testing the waters in her transition. While presenting in women's clothing at the bank, she's had some negative experiences. What advice would you give to her and to us when we witness any harassment of her? We can, as cisgender people or trans people further in our lived experience, what can we do to help those who may be early in their transition without passing privileges feel more comfortable and safer at games? This is actually kind of for anyone who might have some insight.
I could recommend. Well, what I could recommend is talking to the supervisor to see if they could provide sensitivity trainings with staff. There's an organization, Trans Latina Coalition. They do a lot of amazing work with trainings with corporations, organizations, medical providers. Reach out to them. Well, first, get the okay from the manager, supervisor, and then do some sensitivity trainings. That will help. And also see if the bank has an LGBT employees group that you can participate with, and they could provide some more guidance in making sure that that bank is supportive of you.
Perfect. I think that's great insight, Eddie. One of the things that I wanted to share, and is kind of an answer to this, is a resource of Pride Republic. If you're at a game and you're not in a space where you feel safe or able to comfortably report a problem, or you just want to enjoy that moment of the game and you don't want to spend 15 minutes talking to security, email us at Pride Republic. Everyone should have our email address. It's LAFC@priderepublic.com. And we can help, whether it's extra training and resources for security in a specific section, or universally in the stadium as well. I think that's a great resource. Sid, a question that's came up specifically about the different perspectives and acceptance in men and women's soccer. Why do you think that happens? And what are things that we could do to help change that narrative?
First of all, I just want to say the guy who made the comment at the bus, what is his name?
At the bus?
The guy who was just talking, the guy who made the comment.
Chickaline.
I got to tell you, man, you coming on here moves me. It's powerful stuff. I'm glad you did not lose your job. As far as men's and women's sports, look, here's the truth. And this is what a lot of people don't want to say. There are just more LGBTQ women in elite women's sports than there are in LGBTQ men in men's sports. I talk to women in elite level soccer and basketball, and they tell me that the number of LGBTQ women on their teams is anywhere from 33% to 80%. So there's just more of them. There just are. I find it hard to believe that in the NFL and MLS, 30 to 80% of the men are LGBTQ. So I think that visibility and just being a part of the majority or 50% of the culture, I think that goes a long way, and it speaks to the importance of visibility, and everybody in the front office and the coaching staff, the fans, the players, just being out and being visible helps change culture.
Thank you. Another question that came in during the presentation was, how can we challenge people when they use culture as an excuse for homophobic language? I think, Eddie, with LEA, you might have some direct experience with this.
Sorry. So this is how because like I said, my family, I get it a lot. And, coming from there, most of my family is Jehovah's Witnesses. So they're super, like, they've been fighting me through this a lot, like a lot. But I just, the way I tell them is, I understand that the culture, in the past, it's been okay to say these things, but in the past, it was okay to murder people because you thought you were doing it for the gods. So now we understand that's not okay. So now we fix it. We do something different. So while for me, I thought that I was not hurting anybody with the language, educating yourself and knowing that now you know that what you're saying is hurting somebody, why would you continue to say that? Like, I understand you've heard it your whole life. I get it. I've heard it my whole life. I've played football my whole life. You know what I mean? I've heard that locker room talk my entire life. That doesn't mean I'm going to sit here and say, yes, it's okay because I've heard it my whole life. You got to understand, just because you've heard it your whole life doesn't mean it's okay to say it.
I think that's actually beautifully a perfect answer. Eddie?
Just quickly add, people use the Confederate flag as well, and they say that's our culture in the South. But we know what that flag represents. So it's the same thing, you can't use, you can say culture all you want, but at the end of the day, it's about today. And if that word is causing harm to someone else, then you got to have the social responsibility to change and be a role model to the younger generation. So those words are not being used as often, and hopefully it will never be used. Just one thing.
Great. Does anyone else have, that's all the questions we have that were submitted during the presentation. If anyone else wants to add some final thoughts or anything that has come to mind during the presentation that you wanted to share, otherwise, Paul, I'll pass it back to you.
I just wanted to add real quick my own thanks to Chiquitin for his comments and for his courage in being here today. Honestly, given everything that happened over the last month, I wouldn't blame you for not wanting to be anywhere near this conversation right now. It means a lot that you're both willing to participate, but also to be an ally. And I think one of the most important things that we often can forget in these kinds of conversations is the value of allyship. It's something that I've really been trying to learn and how to use my own privilege in a number of spaces to be an ally to other communities, and really think, frankly, one of the more incredible experiences I've had with LAFC, one of the reasons that TIFO was so special for me was what it signaled about a whole community rallying around being allies for the LGBT community. So I just really want to say thank you and encourage others to be allies in whatever capacity you can as well.
Thank you. I mean, that is a great wrap up. I probably couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you very much. If nobody has any other questions, this is amazing. We are actually ending right at 8 o'clock. So yay for the on-time machine. I guess that will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We really do appreciate it. Thank you very much to the panel for also participating. Mark, thank you for moderating. Chiquilin, thank you. Luke, thank you.
If I can for 1 second, I'm going to be holding, I had one planned for this month, but because of this, I canceled it. But I'm going to be holding similar Zoom calls to this one once a month. So anybody here that wants to participate in that, they'll be posted through my Instagram and through Cuervo's Instagram. So hopefully I could see you guys there in the future too.
Awesome.
And thank you guys for having me again.
Oh, thank you. All right, with that, I guess we will call it a wrap. And everybody, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.